All right. Well, I'll let you guys in on the behind the scenes of what was really going on and why it wasn't on right away. What was really happening is I was holding out. I had Zach over a barrel demanding like a six-figure contract to do this next podcast, and I think he obliged. So I'll let you know. I'll share the wealth with you guys if he obliges. Sorry about the late start. Sorry about the lack of advertised show. Sorry about not having a show last week. Fully intended to do that. Life. Ain't it busy? And so I wasn't able to speak to all you great people last week, but I want to talk about something kind of similar as what I was going to talk about and tie it in with some new pieces of information that we have received in this past week. So we're going to break that down. I'm going to explain to you why I am so ready for a potential PPV slash PLE war between AEW and WWE. Let them fight, I say, and I'll explain exactly why. I think it's a good thing that WWE has become hyper aggressive in its pursuit of market share recently. We'll spend most of the show on that topic. Maybe we'll talk, have a lot of side conversations. Obviously, we'll get thrown off track. We'll talk a little sports because that seems to come in. There's not a ton going on right now. But if you guys want to get in on the conversation, if you guys want to talk, if you want to share your thoughts on what I'm talking about, or if you want to maybe take the show in a different direction, go ahead and send a chat. And if you're being really generous, you can send one of them super chats. Those ones are extra special. That puts you right at the front of the line. But this is a no-cost show. If you want to talk, go ahead and fire up your phone, fire up your computer, get your thumbs ready, send me a comment. I'll probably read it, or I won't. But it doesn't really cost you anything. Unless it does, and then thank you. I should probably introduce myself to anyone who caught on a second late, especially to the RVD audience who sometimes gets confused of why they were thinking RVD was going live and they see a guy in a NoFX hat talking about meteor right stills and all this other ridiculous stuff. I am Rob. I think it's spelled the way it is in the lower third there of that screen. I think I'm going to have to just legally get my name changed to that one. If you want to follow me on the socials, you can see the handle down there. This is the Nocturnal Knockout, our weekly-ish deep dive into all kinds of topics, random topics, just whatever we feel like kicking back and talking a little wrestling. We like to do this on Wednesday nights. It is called the Nocturnal Knockout, a Brass Ring Media podcast right here on YouTube. How's it going, guys? It's been 2 weeks, and I feel like every time I take a break from this show, there's just so much that has happened. There's so much that's gone on, and then I miss out on the discourse. I really miss out on not having all you guys there in the chat, having the comments. That really bums me out when I don't get to do that on a regular basis. So I am so super grateful and glad to be back on it today. Let me just fire up my young adult beverage here. Nice, we're not doing any product placement here. I just wanted something a little bit different than the swig of water for the working man. So indulge me on my Coke that I'm partaking in to keep me awake on this show. All right. So you can tell by the title and maybe the thumbnail, but I think my premise here is pretty clear. But I want to get into it with you guys. And I've wasted enough time and I started late. And if at all possible, I generally like to get you guys out of here before Dynamite starts. So let's get cooking with it. All right. In case you haven't been paying attention lately, or if you've been living under a rock, or you've been too busy to, do your regular activities like some of us have in recent weeks, WWE is trying to just destroy AEW right now. WWE has always counter-programmed their competition. It's one of the things they do, and they've always done. They counter-program on television. They've started pay-per-view wars in the past with companies, and they usually tend to run live events opposite of where their competition is going. Some people thought this was a Vince McMahon exclusive trait, but as we are seeing now, with him seemingly gone from the company, his old son-in-law, Triple H, and the con man, Nick Khan, are right down the same page. They almost reflexively are here to try to crush and kill their competition. Before you say that AEW isn't really competition, I would kind of check you on that just a little bit. I'm not saying it's good competition. I'm not saying it's even competition, but it is competition. Now, history tells us that WWE's warfare practices generally work. That's why they were known as the wrestling monopoly. That's why effectively they still kind of are. And they have ever since Vince Jr. took over in the 80s. They've always had enough cash, enough cachet, and all the other resources that they've had, whether it was because they were positioned in New York or they were just the original wrestling company or just the incompetence of another wrestling company down south. We know how this generally ends. WWE wins most of the fights that they pick. And sometimes this comes across as a little mean on WWE's behalf. But I can say in their scenario and what they're doing against AEW, I kind of get it. I'm not saying I'm sympathetic to them, but I kind of get it. Because as I mentioned, there is competition going on here. Last time we talked about the WWE ESPN deal. I feel like the details of that deal have just become more unclear since we talked about it 2 weeks ago. Or whenever it was that we talked. Yeah, it was 2 weeks ago. We were here on this show, and many of you who have some sort of access to ESPN in some form or fashion were pretty confident that nothing was going to change any of that. That, hey, we got ESPN, we're all set. Well, I'm set because I pay for ESPN through my Hulu, but most people who currently have ESPN, such as cable subscribers, you're not as set as of now. Now, that could all change by the time this deal goes through. We get to next year's PLE season. You might not be paying $30 a month, but as I mentioned, that was a big prize for WWE. WWE is in the media rights business. So is AEW. And you might not think they have comparable audience sizes, which they really don't, but they're competing for similar pieces of real estate. I mean, it's not necessary and it may happen in the future, but I'm pretty sure WWE would like AEW not to be on Max, and they would like to have some presence there. And they have some presence within the Turner ecosystem, and I'm sure they would like a whole hell of a lot more. And I'm sure from the perspective of a company like Turner, like Max, they want to pay for what they can pay for, but they want the best stuff as well. And they're only going to choose probably one of the companies because there's only so much real estate, financial, and otherwise to go around. With all of that said, I think people are a little shook or stuck in their ways of thinking on certain things. Now, when we talk about wrestling monopolies, and other companies, I think our most recent reference point, for good reason, is the Monday Night War. And the Monday Night War, it birthed a lot of things. It birthed a whole different style of wrestling. It birthed the consolidation of wrestling. It had tons of reach across pop culture and enhanced wrestling to a great deal of popularity. There are fans and people who talk about wrestling to this day that would not be there, would not be talking about wrestling, have no real knowledge of wrestling had it not been for the Monday Night War era. It was, from a fan's perspective, the best time to be a fan, probably in the last, since then for sure. But even going back to the 80s, it might, you could talk to someone who was in their prime as a wrestling fan in the 80s to see which one was better. But the point is, that was the era of multiple companies and these wars going down between these companies, usually the NWA and WWF, which merged into WCW versus WWF. But as we mentioned before, WWE is no stranger to these anti-competitive practices. And even in recent years, the things they did in the UK and how they were sort of subsuming those promotions until it wasn't as profitable to do so. Now, they're not an official monopoly. They had to pay a lot of money because they kind of got declared as such to MLW not too far back. But they are the big boys on the block, and we've seen what a wrestling war looks like. We are always comparing that to the Monday Night War. And I think if we compare television to television right now, it's never been a very clean comparison. And Monday Night War conflict, it was great, right? You're sitting there with a remote. You have all the power going back and forth. You got Sable on one show and Kevin Nash on another show. What more could anyone ever want? It was the greatest of times. But you know what? These conflicts, they don't have to be so even to end up being epic and end up being beneficial for the audience. For years, wrestling audiences have clamored to have competition again. Ever since 2001, all the way to like 2019. What was the number one thing that everyone would diagnose the problem in pro wrestling? There's no competition. There's no competition. There's no competition. And that was pretty good reason and pretty good logic. Like, I will say this. There was no reason sometimes for WWE to have the laziness that they did in that time period. Like, there is a point where you could kind of take some pride in your craftsmanship. What's up, Azan? What's up, Tom? But it's what people wanted. People wanted competition because the last time that wrestling felt really good to them, there was competition and all the things that go along with the narratives as we talk about competition. It leads to innovation, to people excelling, to having really good choice. Really puts these companies in a position where they have to compete for your dollar or for your attention. And so they tend to put their best foot forward. Now, the results of these promotional wars, whether it's on television or even back to the territorial days, have actually always been, I think, detrimental to wrestling companies. Generally, you tend to burn yourself out. I don't know if they fear Abazan, but they are doing everything they can to take him out. And I think they have good reason to not want them in the marketplace because they are competing for similar pieces of real estate. So they'd rather them not be there. And I said all that about competition, that people want competition, but I don't think people love it when WWE is the one being competitive. And that makes sense. They are the big bullies on the block, right? And it's not fun. Nobody likes that. Like, we can all love competition, but does anyone really love when the Walmart comes into a town and just puts all the small businesses out of business? No, we don't like competition. Then we actually hate competition because it's like, works seemingly for everyone when the big boy is the one doing the competing. And especially in this current environment and what we've had for many years where WWE never fights anymore from a spot of weakness. Back in the glorious times, back in the Monday Night War, WWE was in a weakened state. They were lesser than, I don't know that they were ever quite as weakened as they make it sound. I just think they had been challenged in a way that they'd never really been challenged. And back then, I mean, Raw was almost canceled in like 1997, and WCW was the hot property with a television network and billionaire backing behind it. So I don't think they were as much of an underdog as they generally tend to present themselves as, but they were definitely in a fight that they won. Not necessarily because of their own offensive moves, although I will say pushing all those guys that WCW didn't push in the mid-90s really seemed to benefit from it, and then stumbling upon The Rock in that process, and also creating the greatest heel in WWE history, who just happened to also be the owner of the company. A lot of things happened right there, and it really worked out for them. But since then, we actually haven't seen that much competition, even in the AEW era, because WWE has essentially never played their starters against AEW starters. Even in AEW's one big victory since they came upon the scene in 2019, their big victory in the Wednesday Night War, that's not exactly a best on best competition. That was the best of AEW, their top guys, versus the third brand of WWE, developmental. And as you all recall, AEW won that battle handedly. And I get it. I get why WWE retreated. There's a few things that go into that. One, they were not putting forward their A product. So whenever they ended up losing it, it's not like you could say, well, Roman Reigns just cannot outdraw MJF, or Roman Reigns can't outdraw Orange Cassidy. I don't know why I'm putting him against those guys, but that was not the claim that realistically could be made. At the time, it was more like, can Rhea Ripley outdraw Kenny Omega? And we're not talking about Rhea Ripley of today either. We're talking about like NXT Rhea Ripley. That was that Wednesday Night War. And I get the retreat from WWE. Again, maybe you're not competition, but in a venue that you tend to dominate, cable television, WWE was not going to be okay with losing on a weekly basis to the competition. They weren't going to be behind in the cable. They were never going to face that head-to-head where people were making a choice not to watch their product or watching something else instead. WWE was not going to have that, and they quickly abandoned that, retreated to Tuesday nights, and that's why we have NXT televised on Tuesday nights to this day, in case any of you guys forgot. I'm pretty sure most of you knew that. But since that Wednesday Night War, if you've noticed, WWE has had a little bit different strategy with their competition. I think initially they did have the hubris to think that their third brand could take out the number one show, the A show, from AEW. They learned that that's not the case. And instead, what they've opted to do is just slightly weaken AEW at every turn that they get. That's how their counter programming has worked. And we've seen it a lot of times, especially when it comes to the PLEs. We already know the narrative at this point, and it's thanks, Justin, for reposting the stream. And here's what happens. Every time AEW has a major show, something you need to watch, one of these PLEs, what WWE does, they counter program with a lesser than show, with an NXT show, generally. The idea is not that that show is going to be better. In fact, it seems like they have been perfectly content to just take the L on whether it's viewership and most notably headlines. I think that's the biggest thing they take that L on. But they do offer, or they tended to offer, a cheaper alternative. And I think that was the sales pitch there. Yes, WWE is not going to offer you a big blowaway pay-per-view the way we got with All In a month ago. They're not going to offer you that to go head-to-head with AEW. No, their strategy has been, let me offer you a cheap developmental show. And if you have to pick, because that other pay-per-view is $54, but you're already paying, you're already subscribed to Peacock or whatever you have, well, you can get your wrestling here. And it doesn't pull everyone away. Obviously, those shows that AEW does have done fairly well, but it does weaken them just a little bit. And that seems to be what WWE was really interested in, just weakening them just enough. And they still are. You got the report from a couple of weeks ago that WWE may essentially be propping up TNA to be on television on Wednesday nights to go head-to-head with Dynamite. Now, we all know how that's going to go. I think Dynamite will just rook whatever TNA puts out there. But that's not the point. The point is to just taper off the enthusiasm, the excitement, the ability of AEW. Because that's what we're competing for these days. Back in the Attitude Era, and I want you guys to just think about this for a second. We talk about the Monday Night War. It didn't really... It's an interesting trade-off. We talk about there being competition, but what were they really competing for in the Attitude Era? When you think about the Monday Night War, what were they competing for? What was the competition over? The competition was more than anything over your attention. It was so much framed about TV ratings. And you ask any modern wrestling executive or anyone who just talks about these kind of things, they will tell you about the lesser importance of ratings, especially in 2025. And now that you have many of these properties not even on television of any sort, the ratings are even more relevant. But it was big back then, wasn't it? But what did it cost you? What was that opportunity cost that you used to have? When you think about it, like I said, you are here with the remote. So the cost was, I'm seeing the Sable segment, but I'm missing the Kevin Nash segment. Or I'm getting the, I don't know, Prince Iakea segment, but I'm missing Vader on this show, early Monday Night War. Whatever it is. That was the decision. Unless you had the other one being taped, unless you traded tapes at school the next day, like so many people did, or what have you. That was the decision you are making. But it didn't actually cost you more to enjoy both products. And they essentially cost you the same. The buy-in was the same, right? In terms of television, where your television package that had Turner probably had USA. Those are pretty common clearances. So essentially every month you were paying for both. Now, there was another avenue that they were competing for your dollars, and that was in pay-per-view. But I think even as a company, WCW was so high, and both companies were just so hyper-focused on television in that era, and the pay-per-view obviously really blew up for WWE as a result of everything being so hot. Now, all of this is about competing for your dollar. A much, much more finite resource than your attention. So there's a few different categories on this. One thing that's great about these modern wrestling wars is that you don't actually have to choose if you can afford it and if you can stay off of social media. Again, going back to All In, there was tons of WWE programming and like 9 hours of one AEW show. As long as you have the time and you have no life, which, let's be honest, you're a wrestling fan, so social life gone, family life gone, anything meaningful you're doing gone, you're watching wrestling. As long as you got the time and the finances to be subscribed to Peacock, to have, you would just need Peacock and to pay for the AEW pay-per-view, you could do it. You could have it all and you could watch it all in its entirety. So there's that classification. The people that can afford it all and watch it all, they're just spending a lot, but they're able to absorb it all. And I brought all of this up to reference what I think most of you know, that this coming September, the starters are finally going to play each other. AEW is going WWE is going head to head on pay-per-view, main roster pay-per-view, against AEW in December. And I say, let them fight. Enough of these NXT shows that are just there to weaken them. Let's let them go head to head. Now, there's the second category of person, the person that's going to have to make a choice because of finances, time, or whatever resource that may be limited. And for those people, the competition is very, very, very real. Because if one thing's going to cost you one thing and you're already paying for that, are you still going to pay for that other thing? And WWE has the advantage here when it comes to this entire model. WWE, whether it's the ESPN model, what they've been doing on Peacock, or going back to the WWE network, since 2015, the gamble that WWE has been making that their stuff doesn't even need to necessarily be good. They just have to have enough fans that like them just enough to forget to cancel their subscriptions or to not do anything about that. Just let it go on. Let that charge happen again. And honestly, when it's a WWE network at $9.99 or $11, or it's Peacock at like anywhere from $4 to $7 a month, if you miss the pay-per-view or not that into the product, it's okay. You can live with that. And it's always been very difficult where AEW, on the other hand, has to really sell these pay-per-views because they're going $50 a pop for these things. So it's always implied that actually AEW has to put in a little more effort. But now, after everything we've heard in the last couple of weeks, I'm not so sure that WWE has such a pricing advantage. I mean, they still do, even if you're paying the ESPN thing, $30 a month, every single month is still cheaper than paying your pay-per-view price of $50+. And we should say AEW now, along with some boxing, are the sole distributors and creators and producers of expensive pay-per-view. That was the other thing that broke last week when I was gone. UFC has now gone to the pay-per-view subscription model. They're going to be on Paramount, which makes sense. WWE coming to ESPN, the pieces start realigning there. So AEW is essentially in this situation where they're the only ones that are selling pay-per-view. How long that's sustainable, that's a little bit different conversation. But this is the battle lines we're fighting on right now. So taking it forward to that September pay-per-view next year, because it's not the case this year. In that scenario next year, you are essentially looking at a $20 price difference between main roster AEW, main roster WWE. That's it. And when you think about all the other add-ons that you need to have WWE programming, whether it's Netflix, you also then need a cable subscription, which gets you a lot of AEW, to be honest with you. But you need access to USA. You might still need Peacock, hold on to the NXT, holding on to the archives. When you add all of that together, is WWE really the cheaper option on television? No, I don't think so. And I think people will have to make choices on this. Now, again, the subscription model has just the built-in apathy to it. Whereas AEW does have to sell me on every one of their pay-per-views. Every time I purchase an AEW pay-per-view, it is a conscious decision. They cannot throw out a horrible card and I will pay that money for it. Not going to happen. There's a card I'm not that interested in. I can catch it elsewhere. I can get the information about it. I can get access to it. WWE haven't missed a pay-per-view at least since 2014 because they've been sort of on that automatic ride. But now it's a choice, and people are going to have to make their media consumption habits. All of these people are banking on all of us just paying way too damn much. But I think we're finally at the point that we are just simply overextended, and there may need to be choices to be made, which is exactly why I am all for a pay-per-view PLE war between these two companies. It has been since 2015 that WWE's really had to try on pay-per-view. Even like their major pay-per-views these days, generally accompanied by like a free month of Peacock. It's like that's all they're trying to do. All they've been trying to do is sell you stuff for less than like $15 a month for the last 10 years. That's what WWE has been trying their hearts out to do. And we've seen some of the low effort that has relegated. And it's been a twofold effect. It puts less urgency on the television shows to sell the pay-per-view, and it puts less urgency on the pay-per-view to be blow away good. In 2024, those WWE PLEs, even when the television wasn't very good around them, the PLEs were amazing. We cannot say the same in 2025. So I am all for WWE putting in a little bit of effort, even if they're doing it for the nefarious reason of trying to kill AEW, which, let's be honest, they're probably going to be successful. Now, as Tony Khan will point out to you, he's got, I don't know if he has more money than Ted Turner used to have or the Turner Corporation, but he definitely has. It's just him and his dad. So whenever Shad Khan is like, if they're not turning profit, then the thing goes away. In that respect, I think AEW might have more of a shelf life in the way that TNA does, that as long as someone's going to keep it going, it'll keep going. There was no one, the only person who wanted to keep WCW going was Vince for like 20 minutes until he got to Tacoma. So that was a little bit of a situation. But have you seen these WWE shows lately, both television and pay-per-view? They are a bore. Raw is repeat every freaking week. Seth Rollins and CM Punk and Bronson's got the shoes around him, and there's another Heyman promo that doesn't make sense. It's been the same Raw for like 3 months. SmackDown got shorter and somehow got more boring, less consequential. There's some Solo Sikoa happening there. And then the PLEs, you guys are always complaining that the matches are, not the matches are short, but the actual cards are too short, which is inverse complaint of what we used to have. And like, there hasn't been, outside of Evolution this year, there hasn't been that PLE. There's been some noteworthy stuff, like when John Cena turned heel, or Jey Uso won the Rumble, or the WrestleMania was a total S show. We talk about those things, but the programming hasn't been great, and it's about to get more expensive. Now, on the flip side, I also think this is going to be good in the short term for AEW. I'm sure AEW doesn't love this, but at least now WWE's putting their actual foot forward, which is going to force, I think, similar things out of AEW. But AEW with Tony Khan, I never got to worry about what he's doing on pay-per-view. Say what you want about Tony Khan as a booker, and there's a lot of criticisms to be made of him. He knows how to put on a pretty good pay-per-view. Like, if he was just like an indie promoter with a ton of money and just had these monthly pay-per-views, Tony could do it up. Tony could do a really good job of that. But another thing we've seen from Tony and from AEW, especially going back to 2024 when WWE was really cooking, their television product as a television product, their weekly product, was awful. It felt lazy. It felt self-indulgent. Well, if they're going up against a WWE that's trying to smash them in every respect on pay-per-view, it is in their best interest to boost those television shows to promote and get people excited about the pay-per-view. Because that's all this is about. Again, it's the dollars that you're actually going to be buying, but what are they selling? They're selling us as fans. They're selling automatic fans. And that's what all these companies are trying to build. Again, these apathetic fans that'll just click on as it is. That's what they're competing for. And WWE's making the bet, as I said, with the competition, that if they can just slowly erode away at that hardcore fan base, then as a company, they're less valuable. It is much less about who can win the ratings war and more so about who can kind of damage the reputation and the feel of the other company. Who can bring that down and take that down into the mud to ultimately win the media rights war, which I am going to say till the end of time. As long as AEW exists in the former fashion that it exists in, it's going to be competition for WWE. Not even competition. I can go fight Francis Ngannou. I have him in the mind for some reason. If I go fight Francis Ngannou tomorrow, he will kill me. I'll be dead, and we'll be doing a rest in peace show for Rob. But I will technically have still been his competition, and he will still have to make moves to end up executing that. Because we will still be competing for the same prize. Now, when you have these smaller wrestling companies that are going around streaming service, obviously they are trying to offer something, to a streaming service or to a media provider, probably at a cheaper price than what these companies are going to pay for WWE. But when it comes to AEW, you are still competing for the major networks at the top. Now, WWE has so much in its arsenal to unload. They literally have an MMA company at their disposal. I mean, you got the Jags on the other side. But my point to all of this is, if this causes WWE to wake up just a little bit, it's not the worst thing in the world. Because in case you haven't been paying attention lately, WWE has become really inaccessible. Like, really, really. They're coming to town right now. We talk about the pricing in terms of what they can offer you as a consumer on television. That's like the only area, by the way, where WWE is the cheaper option. Have you seen these live ticket prices lately? I got Raw coming to town, and I'm going to look on my phone right now, and I'll tell you whether or not I'm going to be going. I kind of know the answer. But my point to this is, these are two companies, and there are real choices to be made right now. A dynamic we have not had in a really, really long time in earnest. I don't care really what type of competition WWE sees AEW as. All I care about is that they see them as competition, because I think it will yield the best of results. All right. So if I want to go to Raw in November, cheapest ticket, single ticket, is going to set me back about $230. That's a resale ticket. It's going to set me back there. It seems like more average pricing is in the 400 and 500 ranges. I got 2 kids. I'm not going to go to Raw and leave them home, but I'm also not going to spend $1,000 on one night of boring television. So that ain't going to happen. Maybe I'll try to make viral content outside of the arena, but can't get in. I'll be like DX trying to get into WCW, but I ain't going to go. I went to Dynamite a few months ago, and I'm not trying to do this AEW versus WWE thing, even though that's a premise of this show. I'm not trying to do it in that tribalistic kind of way, because that tribalism, by the way, that's what the companies want. They want their team red, team blue sort of mentality with this stuff. That's what they want. That's not what I'm advocating for, because that stuff is stupid. You guys sound really dumb when you guys are arguing about this stuff online. No. What I'm advocating is for these companies to not just have to counter program, but actually put their best foot forward against each other, so we can get a little bit of effort. Because I'm tired of this. Speaking of media, I got media on the brain. I'm tired of this media era that we're in right now, where nobody has to be good. And it doesn't have to be the case in wrestling. Like, that could be the case with other entertainment properties where it's like, yeah, well, I'm an NBA fan, so I got the 42,000 streaming services. Or, yeah, I like the NFL and I want to watch my team, so I'll give my blood to my firstborn to do that. Well, you do have to do that with those things. Like, shout out to Ice Cube in the Big Three. He's better at winning basketball than he is in acting in War of the Worlds movies. But, like, as a basketball fan, I kind of need to watch NBA. As a football fan, I kind of need to watch NFL. Same thing with NHL. I don't know which the soccer league is to watch, but I'm sure you get the idea. But soccer is a kind of maybe an instructive example, because there is choice to be made. It might not be a fair fight, but there is choice to be made in wrestling nowadays. And I love that if they're going to give it to us head to head, they're actually giving us that choice. I love having that choice again. And let's face it, here's the little dirty secret in the room. It might not be good for everyone involved at all times, but if you want to see both things, it's 2025. You don't really got to make a financial decision on those things. I didn't endorse that, but I mean, come on. Let's be honest. So I say let them fight. WWE's probably going to win anyway. So let's enjoy the war as everything gets burned to the ground. Look at that. Got the rant in the window. Stayed on topic. Had very, very few technical difficulties, which is amazing for me. I never do that. And I think I'm going to get you out of here early this week, because I have to go do something a little early. So I thank you for listening to my rants on wrestling media. Not wrestling media, wrestling media rights. I go on rants on wrestling media. I'll do that all day. Dave versus Wade. Who's Sean's big competitor now? What? I don't. John Pollock. I mean, still those guys. But we could do like a wrestling media tier list. But media rights right now is what I'm into, because we're kind of in business season. All this is in flux. I've got it all in the mind, and honestly, as I said, I'm kind of excited. Now, a year from now, when the Walmart has essentially taken the small town and ruined it, talk to me then. I'll probably have a mea culpa. But until then, I'm going to just gloat and say I'm right. But as I said earlier, I do have to get out of here a little bit early this week. So go ahead, subscribe to us on YouTube, find us on Patreon, become a member. Tons of great content, daily content coming out. This is Brass Ring Media. I've been Rob, and this is the Nocturnal Knockout. See ya.